3, 2, 1, and we're live. You're tuning to the Cosmic Children podcast. I'm your host, Kevin, and today I have an interesting guest in the studio with me. This individual has risen to fame in the past 2 years, and I think he'll be a fascinating guest to have on the show. Toby, could you please introduce yourself to those who might not have heard of you, who you are, and what you do?
Right. So hi everybody. I'm Toby. I guess thanks Kevin for having me. What I do, I think in essence, in summary, I draw, right? And over the years, I've drawn for brands. I worked with brands like G-Shock, ASICS, Levi's, and at the same time, I've also drawn on walls, public walls like shophouses along Tanjong Pagar, offices like VaynerMedia and stuff like that. And amidst all of that, I think the thing that sort of underlies is my attempt to make art accessible to people in Singapore. So I do that through like pop-ups at bars, along the streets, and stuff like that.
Yep.
And all of that accumulates to me trying to prove, along with my other creators in Singapore, that art as a career is possible in Singapore. One project at a time.
That sounds like a very tailored media copy.
It is. And then I obviously came prepared, and so did you, right?
So, wonderful. Okay, so to kickstart this conversation, I'm curious to know who or what is Tobyato?
So I'm Toby.
Yep.
Tobyato is my artist persona. Right? So it's not like it's two different from the other, right? But I think in my experience, I haven't been doing this for too long, right? So I guess this is a non-tailored copy, right? So I've been doing this for about 3 years.
Yeah.
I'm working with different clients and stuff like that. One thing I've realized is that there is quite a fine balance between drawing a line between who Toby is and who Tobyato is online, right? So I've come to slowly draw the line between Tobyato is the artist's online presence in terms of marketing, in terms of working with brands. That is Tobyato. He's a local artist that does this sort of shit, right? But Toby is just me lah. In essence, I am still Tobyato, but Tobyato is not Toby.
Yep.
Right? So Toby is a guy that likes to draw. Tobyato is the person that brings everything out.
Yep.
Yeah. So Tobyato, obviously, the name itself obviously derives from Toby. Right? So when I first started out, as many Singaporeans do, right? There's this survey and shit that, the 1/3 of Singaporeans want to go back to Japan. Right? So Singaporeans have this fascination with Japan, and so did I lah. From the country to the culture to the visual aesthetic. Right? So Tobyato, in essence, is basically Tobyato, which is Toby's art in Japanese.
Oh, very simple, very wonderful. Yeah.
Right. So in essence, my artist persona is my art.
Yep.
Right. And that is it lah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned so succinctly that it's a persona. So I'm curious to know, was it always the plan to have a separate identity like this, or did you realize it was important along the way, or did you make the distinction a lot more clearer in recent memory?
Right. So there was a few realizations, right? So when I first started this Instagram page, it was as most creatives consider, right? They have their personal Instagram, and they somewhere along the line, someone plants and incepts the seed into their main. Oh, you start Instagram for your art account, right? Yeah, put your art there, use a portfolio. And it's like, yeah, sure. Yep. So when that happens, then you can't do like Toby 2, right? Right. So then you bring up the question, what should that handle be?
Yep.
So at that point, I was still in uni. I haven't started artist moniker or have artist name yet. Right. Up to that point, all projects were just Toby.
Yep.
Right. And which is fine lah, right? But I knew I was speaking to other creatives, and one thing I realized was that a lot of creatives, their artist name or like their websites would just be like shellysart.com, right? Or like Shelly's things.
Yep. Shelly's works.
Exactly, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But I didn't want to be so as literal as that was lah, right? So I knew I wanted something that was Google. I use the term Googleable.
Sure.
Right? So when you Google, right, there's no other thing that will pop up except my shit.
Yep.
So I thought I just literally put Google Translate Toby's art, right? And it just like I think it was katakana, right?
Yep.
The one that has more phonetic translations, and it was Tobyato. So the spelling, the correct spelling was actually Tobiato.
Yep.
But that was taken.
Yep.
I was like, oh shit. So I almost didn't use it. I was like, oh, it's taken. What can I do? I started thinking many other things. Then one day I was in the shower, as most things are, right? Okay, no, I was just taking a shit.
Okay, as most things are. Yeah.
As most things are, right? So I thought like, if TOBIATO is taken, then why not TOBY? And it wasn't. And I looked at it for a while and it looked quite nice, right? As a little like lockup on its own.
Yep.
So I just took it lah.
Yep.
So that was when I started posting my art online. So usually at the start, again, as with most creatives are, right? They would view that as like a portfolio. So I just uploaded works.
Yep.
And my captions were literally title of artwork.
So descriptive.
Medium.
Yep.
Date, year, description.
Like what they taught you in school.
Exactly, right? And that was it, right?
Yep.
So I pulled it up whenever people wanted to see my shit.
Yep.
Right? I didn't really promote it. It was like just essentially Behance on Instagram.
Yep.
Right? And then I think as I went along, I started trying to see what I could do with that page. Right? So I saw other creatives like people that showed their artist life as opposed to their work.
Yep.
So I tried lah, right? And then I think it wasn't so much of a conscious choice, right? But I think there was this one piece of work that I did. So normally my track was just to post the work, right? But it just so happened that piece of work, I think it was it was an artwork along Orchard Road, like one of the glass panels or something. I did like a vinyl sticker over it. And when that went out, the only photo I got was a photo of me and the artwork. I didn't have a photo of a standalone.
Yep.
Right. I did my best to content aware myself away in Photoshop, but it doesn't look right. Right. So I just put it up with me.
Yeah.
And then at that point, the people that were following that account were just my friends lah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So they could, when let's say even if someone knows it's my work, when they scroll past, they'll just see my work. Right. But they see me, then that post was quite well received lah.
Yeah.
Right. So I always say, being relevant in the industry is responding to what the industry wants from you and what you can provide for the industry.
Yep.
Industry meaning you basically people that like shit.
Yep.
Right. So that was basically the start of me deciding to not just show work, but show the person behind the work. Right. So it started from there lah. And then from then on, it was a conscious choice to show more of Toby with the art.
Yep.
Right. So essentially the embodiment of that persona, right? Tobyato.
Yep.
Art with Toby.
Yep.
And then that sort of grew lor. So that was a few like realizations that led to the current where I'm at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we move forward, are you able to summarize what Tobyato, the moniker and the persona, what it means to you right now in 2022?
I think right now, it's still quite closely linked to me, right? Because ultimately, when people like they come up to me and say, "Are you Tobyato?" I can't say no, right?
Yeah.
So
that'd be quite weird. Yeah,
it's a bit odd, right?
Yeah.
So like there was once I was painting a mural, then I think there was this guy that was a bit not as maybe he wasn't aware of what was happening right in the mural, but he saw like my tag at the side and he said like, "Oh, are you guys Tobyato?" Then he thought Tobyato was like a brand.
Yeah, it was like a group or whatever.
Right?
Yeah.
Then I was like, I paused for a second. It's like, oh no, I'm Tobyato, which is not wrong, right? So I guess going back to your question, I think Tobyato is essentially still Toby, a kid that likes to draw.
Yep.
And a kid that likes to draw that has made a career of it. In Singapore.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. So in essence, that's it lah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So going back to what you just shared about the initial startup of Tobyato and how it began, and how you begin to adopt and I guess blur the lines between your own personal life as Toby and Tobyato. Was there apprehension initially to show yourself as, oh, I'm the artist behind Tobyato? Because initially you were just posting works. Was there always like an apprehension there? Because I would imagine most creatives are not very socially inclined. They always prefer to, let the work speak for itself and not do any sort of self-promotion. But did you feel the same way like that? Or did you learn to adopt and adapt as you went along?
Right. I think so that probably was another realization that came along.
What is?
I think the fact that social media is social media.
To begin with.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So in essence, that's like influencers, as much as it's such a buzzword nowadays, right? That people talk about. Influencers literally do influence because people follow their life.
Yep.
Right? So what I've noticed and what many people have also realized, I hope, right, that influencers' lives are the product. They are breakfast.
It's like a commodity. Commodity.
Yeah. Kopi O, teh si, kosong. Hey, they don't buy that shit, right? They buy like lattes and flat whites. But that the fact their order in itself is a product. Right? That sharing is content, which leads to their lifestyle, and that lifestyle is the product. And I think I knew as my following started to grow, of course the like what you just mentioned, right? Let the art speak for itself. That of course crossed my mind. But then at the back of my mind, I think maybe it's a part of me that wants people to know who's the person behind it. Right? Of course there's nothing wrong with letting the art speak. But at the same time, a part of me also wants people to know who created that piece of work.
Yep.
Right? Be it if it's liked by someone, or like if it's not liked by someone, at least they know who created it.
Yep.
Right? So I think that little part of me wanted, at the same time when people were responding better to seeing the person behind the work, right? So that came along with that. But at the same time, the realization also of the fact that life itself can be a product. Right? So that's where I told myself to draw the line. I will only share about art related. And once in a while, thread that Venn diagram overlaps slightly into my life.
Your life as Toby.
Yeah, right. But very rarely.
Yep.
And that allows me to prevent my life from being the product.
Yep.
And art will always be the product. Everything surrounding art.
So that's the bottom line.
That for me, that is as in 1 year later, you ask me, that might change. But for now, that is the hard line, right? Tobyato shows the life of Tobyato.
Yep.
But not Toby's life.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think that kind of was the realization,
yep.
And how I overcame the fact that I should just let the art speak for itself.
Yep.
Yeah.
Before we move on from this, because I find the idea of adopting a persona or moniker to be extremely fascinating and I guess relevant, because in this age of, I guess, profile pictures and avatar names, you can represent yourself to be whoever you want. If you have the right words, the right images, you can represent yourself. That might not necessarily mean that you're like that, but you can represent yourself online. So has it felt in any way restrictive, the moniker of Tobyato, or does it still feel very free, very open? You can do whatever you want with it. Yeah.
Right. I think it's a fair question. I think with now online with especially with Web3.
Yep.
Right. So I see where that question is coming from. With like PFPs and everything. I think it's very easy to be someone that you might not necessarily be in person, right? But I think for me, it was never a restriction, right? So I do draw the line between Tobyato and Toby.
Yep.
On a personal sense, right? It's a personal choice.
What does that look like though?
I think it's just what I choose to put out into the world as Tobyato, right? So at the core of it, Toby is still Tobyato. Tobyato is still Toby, right? It's not like Marshmallow, right? No one knows who the hell he is.
Yeah, because it's a mask and everything. Yeah,
it's a pure anonymous separate entity from who he is. He could be in the crowd dancing with people and no one will be the wiser, right? But that's not the same for me, right? Toby is still Tobyato. Tobyato is still Toby.
Yep.
But I think along that line, there is still that genuine sense of things. And I think Tobyato as a persona is not formed by me. It's not like I had a brand guide. It's like, oh, Tobyato only when he goes for events, he has to be cool. Right? I'm not, right? I'm not a cool look. I've given up looking cool.
Yeah, you spilled beer just now, so yeah.
I did not. The beer spilled itself.
Yeah, it was the beer's fault, of course.
Of course. I just opened it flat on a table.
Yeah,
just
victim blaming.
Want that to be clear.
Okay. Please continue, yeah.
Right. So I think when people talk about personas, there's always this perception of it being a choice, right? Creating a persona. Like Marshmallow is a very good example, right? Marshmallow is pretty much a persona, right? I have, it could be anybody on stage, right? Let's be honest.
Yeah, because you can program the playlist can play itself. You get someone more competent than you can play it. Yeah.
Yeah, you just teach him like your the way
mannerisms.
You jump. Exactly, right?
Yeah.
No one really, it could work, right? So that persona is created, right? But Tobyato was never that case, right? It was just me sharing my work. And I think that Tobyato persona, in a way, formed itself because of social media. So the persona was created based on the perceptions of what people saw Tobyato is.
That's interesting. Okay.
Right? So it's not like I decided, okay, I'm this frumpy kid that's not cool, right? That looks like a child, even though I'm almost 30.
Yep.
And I'm going to create a persona that is not that. Right? It was never that case. It was just me splitting my professional life with my personal life, and very much still the same person, but just cause I split that and I don't show me in flip-flops and singlets, which is me every day.
Yeah.
Right? People form the persona by themselves.
Yep.
Right? I'm not saying that people think Tobyato is cool. Maybe some people do. Thank you for those that do. But that persona is formed based on what I put out. So I think it's more of that than like a formed persona. So in that light, I guess it doesn't feel restrictive, back to your question, right? Because it's almost like it's just a slice of Toby. Right? So Tobyato is a curated Toby.
Yep.
Still very much Toby, but not all of Toby.
You're just showing what you want to show ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. And that persona forms itself right? Because of that curation. Yeah.
So I'm curious to know what keeps you grounded.
I think, so I had a very late start to the arts.
What does that mean?
So I was doing science all the way to junior college.
Oh, you went that route. Okay.
Yes, I did. I didn't take art at all.
Okay.
Right? So just to like rewind way back.
So Singapore lost a scientist and gained an artist here.
I mean,
Okay.
I could have solved a lot of like.
You could have, yeah. Okay.
Maybe.
Please continue.
Who's to know?
Yeah.
Right. So in primary school, secondary school, like Sec 1. So in lower secondary, in my neighborhood school, we took art, right? Just to try it out, right? So I always enjoyed drawing. So I doodled on my worksheets to the point where I don't write my name on worksheets, I just draw. And the teacher would know that, that's Toby's, right? Yep. So on that note, I had nice teachers lah. They could scold me, but they didn't lah, right? So I always say that because nice teachers can really change a lot of things.
They stick with you like mentally.
Yes, exactly. The fact that I'm talking about this now, like decades later. Yep. Okay, so back to the point. So we took art, right? So there was this like brief, it was just black and white. Okay. So for the assessment, for the test, I did a pencil drawing of like an artwork. I can't remember what the artwork was, but I put effort. Because as someone that likes to draw, obviously, the only subject that I enjoyed, right? I put in effort, right? Yeah. So I drew, I can't remember what I drew. I drew a pencil, but it was only pencil. Yep. Because of black and white. And I failed.
Wonderful.
Because the teacher said I didn't put in effort. Because it was only pencil.
Interesting. Okay.
Right? So that, in a very a young mind, you can see how that would affect someone.
Was that scarring for you?
I wouldn't say scarring, but that made me choose not to pursue art at all.
Okay.
So that when I moved to upper sec, I told my parents I don't want to do art.
Yeah, because of that.
Right, right. Then it continued on to junior college. Right. My parents asked me, why don't you do H1 art?
Okay.
Right. And I told them, no, I don't want. Art Singapore, what for what?
Yep.
Like literally for what? Like, that's exactly what I said.
Yep.
So I didn't. Right. It was only after junior college, after A levels, when I was drawing all the way on my own, right? On my notes. Yep. Only after A levels, when I was waiting for a national service, many people were doing part-time jobs, right? As Singaporean sons do. Yep. Right? So they were waiting tables, banquets and stuff like that. I didn't want to do that, right? So I just went to Job Street and searched art. And there was a job posting for an art teacher teaching kids how to paint at an art studio. I signed up, got an interview, brought my doodles down,
pieces,
and got the job.
Okay.
Right? So it was a mix of them urgently needing someone and them taking a chance on me. Yeah. So that was the start of my art journey. So from there, then I moved on to pursuing arts and making the decision to do arts in university. Yeah. Right? So I guess going back to your question in a very roundabout way, I think my late start to the arts actually informed a lot of the decisions that I make. in terms of how I view art and how I approach art.
How has that changed though? Because I can imagine having that experience so young and going like to JC and everything, but still keeping a sort of like a active interest in drawing and doodling.
Right.
Did that make you like skeptical about or earning a living or being pragmatic about earning an income through art?
Right.
Was that ever like has that ever crossed your mind, or let's say you received advice from your parents to take something safer? Yeah.
Right. I don't think so. My parents were pretty much like dream parents for someone that likes art.
What does that mean?
In a way where they saw that I was drawing, right?
Yeah.
So they like I said, they pushed me to potentially even take like H1 art in junior college. I was the one that said no. Right. So I think my parents were very supportive in terms of the pragmatic decision to pursue arts as a career or not. The moment I decided not to pursue it as a subject, it wasn't a clear thought in my head, right? But looking back, it was me essentially saying, I just want it as a hobby lah.
Yeah.
Right. So I was just drawing. And that brings up more of the question of whether or not your passion should remain a hobby or you should turn your passion to your career.
Yep.
There's so many podcasts about that, right?
Yep.
So that in itself is the topic. But I think the decision for me to turn my passion into the career came at the art studio lah. When I was literally surrounded by creatives. The other art teachers were students from like NAFA, LaSalle.
Yep.
And then I saw shit they were doing lah. Like, oh, that's cool. I want to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And then thankfully the art studio boss worked with me on a portfolio within a few months, submitted it to NTU and got in. Right. So that was the start.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think from then it then was a choice that to make art a career.
Yep.
Because it never was until that point.
Yep.
So everything else up to that point in my life was, I always say that it was okay. Like I did okay. I scraped through everything. Like I was just cruising. And when that happened, that was the first like blimp. Both in terms of how I felt, in terms of what I enjoyed.
It's like a crossroads of sorts.
It was, I guess so. Yeah. It was the first time that I felt that it was the first time I genuinely, in the bottom of my gut, felt that if I worked hard, I could make something out of it. Right? What that something was, I didn't know lah. Right. So, but I knew that was the first time I felt that way. And that pushed me to work as hard as I did lah over the past few years.
I can imagine it's also something very difficult to describe in words, because it's so uniquely tailored to your experience. Yeah. So
over the years, like some people ask me like, hey, why you work so hard for what? Like essentially they ask me what drives me, and I don't have an answer.
Okay.
Because it's exactly what I described, right? I ask myself, I think virtually every day, like, Toby, why are you working so hard? Right? You're just sitting in your room drawing and like answering emails and shit on your own. But for what? To what end? Right? And I haven't have an answer yet. I haven't really understood why I work so hard. But I think it's very much to do with, I think part of the reason is almost like art or nothing attitude.
Art or nothing.
Right? Okay. So that is a very cliche, like nice way to put it.
Yeah.
Right? But if you break it down to the core, it's pretty much, if art doesn't work out, for me, I'll just go back to my science cruising life. Which would probably mean me going trying to go back to science, get an engineering degree, work as engineer, 9 to 5, go home, play Mobile Legends. Nothing wrong with Mobile Legends. Yeah. Right? But that is, as in, I'm just describing a very cliche.
I think you play League, but I think,
okay,
sure.
fair.
If you prefer mobile,
Either or, it's just an embodiment of mobile games in general, or like low access mobile games you play with friends, social mobile games, and nothing wrong with that. Right? But I think it's what drives me is something that I've always tried to ask myself but haven't really like grasped, which is a bit odd for someone that is quite driven.
I think the oftentimes with intangible things like this, or more abstract things like this, more often than not, you really have the answer, but it takes a bit of hindsight maybe to make it clear. To have 20/20 vision on that.
Yeah, I think hindsight is a good word. Yeah.
So I'm curious to know what changed your perspective on art at that job, because it seems quite monumental that Was it something someone said, or was it just you being in the presence of all these different artists and teaching that your framework of what art is shifted?
Right. I think looking back at how I describe it, right?
Yeah.
It definitely sounds more life-changing than it actually was.
As most things are.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, of course, if I could obviously describe it as such.
Yeah.
Right? And that wouldn't be wrong. Right? But as most things are in my life, I think when people read news stories, right? When people read headlines, there's always like, oh, what was the turning point where your life changed, right? It's life-changing moment where you never look back ever since, right? But I've never felt that. I'm not saying that cannot happen. But I think a lot of my life has been just like a climb.
Okay.
Right? I view it as I'm just climbing up the slope.
Are we talking about stairs or mountains here?
Either way.
Okay.
Right? It's just
no difference, dude.
Oh, fair. I run slopes and now and then, right?
Okay,
fair enough.
okay.
I mean, okay, fine. I think more of like a nice hike.
Okay.
Incline.
Yep.
It's still incline, but a hike.
Okay.
Right? So I think I wouldn't call because life-changing moment is more like oh, you're cruising along and it's like boom,
Yeah,
right?
the heavens open up,
yeah,
basically.
like literally a gateway open and your life was never the same.
Yep.
Right, my life is very different from like 7 years ago, right? But it was like my life was like this, and then it started climbing gradually from here. So it wasn't like a life-changing moment. It was almost like a beginning.
Yep.
Right. So it wasn't like a oh, I found my calling finally.
Yep.
It was not at all.
Yep.
It was more like, yeah, this feels right.
This feels right.
Right. This feels right.
Yeah,
and
okay.
yeah, this is fun. I enjoy being surrounded by creatives.
Yep.
And I think it was also a mix of the art studio boss seeing something in me that I didn't see in myself.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So to this day, okay, June, you might not hear this, right? But I always thank her. Like every year, Chinese New Year, I'll still go and find her.
That's cool.
And stuff like that. And I bring some bakwa,
Yeah.
Woo.
Yep.
Right. So it's life is always about more so. Life is about risk, right? Taking chances. But I think a big part of life that people don't really talk about is also people taking their chance on you. And I've been very fortunate that throughout my career, people have taken a chance on me.
Yep.
On more occasions than one.
Yeah.
Whether or not that has worked out for them, I hope, right? But I'm grateful regardless, Yeah.
Because it's interesting that you mentioned this particular school teacher in such high regard, because earlier on you were mentioning about the back in, I think, secondary school. I think they just kind of put away what you just did in that, and that kind of stuck with you, and this kind of stuck with you as well. So I think that's quite interesting, because
the contrast.
it is someone taking a chance on you, and I guess you feeling that, and whatever you just shared, I think what is the most poignant fact is that it is not a conscious decision. Oh, I'm going to be an artist from now on. Am I right to assume that there was still uncertainty throughout that process?
Oh, definitely
Okay. Good to know, because life is not like the movies.
Yeah.
It's not like, we decide on something and next frame you go through a montage and you're there.
Yeah.
It sounds as though there's a lot of micro decisions, or very conscious, maybe I'll do this today, maybe I'll do this tomorrow, maybe I'll do this, I'll go for this event, I'll do this job. It is all the small decisions that you have made, whether right or wrong, who's to say? But on hindsight, you can look back at all the decisions you made and you can see the tapestry that you have done. And because that is the sentiment and the feeling I'm getting from you. It's not like this very big decision that someone grants you like the blessing to be an artist, but it's just the micro decisions all along the way.
100%. I think you described it better than I could have.
Yeah, so let me write your copy next time.
Oh, sure. I'll buy you beer. That won't spill.
So taking a little bit of a tangent, would you consider yourself an artist? Because people who draw, there's a lot of words to describe something like that. And especially in times today, we love labels. You can call someone an illustrator, an artist, a visual artist, a doodler. Has any of these words resonated with you? And do you feel like there's a difference between, I will not call myself an artist, but I will call myself a visual artist or illustrator? Because I have spoken with primarily like illustrators and people who draw before. And some of them, they push away the label and the descriptors of the word artist because it means something else to them. So I'm curious to know what word or what label suits you best?
I think that's a good question. I think, like you say, everybody loves labels, right? Especially in Singapore. So I think the fact that it's a question that you've asked like other people, it's a fair one because it's something that has came through my mind and something that I've sort of reasoned with as well. So I think for me, when I first started like giving labels, right? Like as with people want labels, right? I always at the start, right? I gave myself 3 labels.
Okay.
Right. So the first one was designer. Right? Because that was what I was trained to do in university. So I have a visual comm degree, like graphic design, right? So like design, essentially design. So no one can say that's wrong, right? I have a bachelor's that says I have a fine arts degree, right? In that. So literally designer, right? And that term is vague enough, and that's fine. Then the next one will be illustrator, because that forms a bulk of my work, which is illustrations. And then the last term is visual artist. And at that point, why I used visual artist was because it was more work that I kind of hoped to do.
What's the difference between a visual artist and illustrator?
I think, again, like you said, it means different things to different people.
What does it mean to you?
Right. So I think I'm again going back to my late start, right? So I'm very pragmatic and literal, right? So visual artist is just an artist that works with visual mediums, right? Anything that can be seen. Right, so visual, you can see it. If someone makes like either ready-made items, illustrations, I would even go to the extent that, in my opinion, right, every illustrator is a visual artist.
Interesting.
In my opinion, right? Whether or not they feel like that fits what they do or they embody the same feelings, I think it's obviously on them. But I think from a dictionary standpoint, right, an artist is someone that creates art. Unless they tell me that they don't think their illustrations are considered art, right? Then okay lah. Then I mean, fair enough, right? But is your art visual? Yes, very much, right? It's an illustration. People see it. People digest it through their eyes, and it's art, right? So it's visual art. And who creates visual art? Visual artists. Right. So I think that's the term I use most often, because it's broad enough, right? It allows me to encompass not just illustrations in my work, but also products like ASICS sneakers, G-Shock watches, like Levi's jackets, right? Those are all also just art. But calling them illustrations, they can still be called illustrations. Ultimately, they are still drawings put onto different mediums, but it doesn't translate, it doesn't explain it as well, right? It's not as accessible a thing to say, right? But I think personally for me, most illustrators can probably tell right off the bat when they look at my work. My work is more abstractions or forms, and I'm not a draftsman, right?
What does that mean though?
In terms like basic drawing, like foundation drawing, right? You like live drawing, that kind of stuff. So there was a point of time in my life where I was in university. I went to live drawing sessions. I wanted to be a great draftsman. I wanted to sit down with a pen in a cafe and just like draw the shit out of like 5 people. Right. And I was very driven to do that at one point of time.
Very romantic, but please go on.
Right. That was so cool for me. Right. I was like, oh, I'm gonna practice. And I even, for one point of time, I even drew people on the train or like on the buses for fun. They were crap. But I did it, right? Because I thought that it's a numbers game. You just got to work through the shitty drawings and one day you'll get better. It is true. But I think somewhere along the line, I realized I enjoyed not doing that more. Because, so the example I like to pull, again, this is my opinion, right? Just a disclaimer. Nothing wrong for people, they like to pursue this path. But, so this is my opinion. This is how I reasoned with myself, right? Feel free to let me know what you think after I explain. So when in the Renaissance period, when people were relishing realism and realism, it gets a bit tricky. It gets a bit dicey when terms are used. But when people were mimicking life, right, like sculptures and paintings in the Renaissance period, right, that was revered because they're so hard to do.
Yep.
Right, but the moment photography was introduced, that changed, right? Because now you have photos to literally replicate life. Of course, there are differences.
Yep.
Lighting, you can't get focus and stuff like that. Of course, drawing it fully in focus is different. But that changed, right? And photography also introduced a new form of art, which is photorealism art, right? And this is not my opinion, right? This is something that my prof in ADM NTU said, right? If you commit yourself to like 50 years of realistic photo drawing, you can probably get decent.
Very inspiring.
Right? And if you think about it, like if you just do nothing, just eat, leisure and train photorealistic drawing, you can do it.
Which I would imagine the goal for something like that is to make it as realistic as possible, right?
Exactly, right? So I ran that through my head, right? I was like, do I want to do that? And the answer was straight away no lah. Right? I don't want to do something anybody else can do, despite how long it takes. And that started to draw me towards artists that had more abstraction, more stylization in their work. And that drew me away from being a draftsman and illustrator. So that's why I always hesitate slightly when I call myself an illustrator or when people label me an illustrator, because my basic foundational drawing in illustration is not great. Because when people talk about illustrator, they always think someone that, can draw anything in the world, right? All the styles you can replicate. You give me that scuff, I give you the lighting and the shadow, right? All the mid-tones and the highlights. Right?
There's a lot of technical jargon packed into a term like that.
Right? So that's when you, especially in the creative industry, when you talk about illustrator, that's kind of like what people expect.
It's heavy.
It is lah. It is lah. And I'm not, I can't, you give me the scarf, I'll give you an abstract version of that scarf, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But I've come to terms with that, right? So I do try to hesitate to use Illustrator now and then. But then again, I do try not to also shy too far away. Because what I do is illustration, right? No one's to say that it's not. It is stylized abstraction of a form of illustration, right? No one's to say it's not illustration, but it's not what the general creative audience would deem like a purebred, damn sick illustrator would do, right? But it's still illustration lah, right? So it's not wrong. It's just not a term that I'm fully, wholly comfortable with. Right? So visual artist is vague and broad enough for me to play lah, essentially.
What about just the term artist itself? Is it something that, is it something personally you want to aspire to, or is it something that you just reject fully, like just artist in itself?
I think, so I think, I guess as in thinking about it now, right? I think it's more of how the context of Singapore, right? When you talk about artists, right? When you ask a random person on the street, or like your auntie uncles, when you say, "Hey, what's isu?" Like, what's isu jia? Right? Like,
isu is art, right?
Yes, so isu jia is artist essentially, right? So when like Chinese New Year or the usual analogies, right? When you say artist, people have this like persona, or have this like have this persona in mind of a pure artist, right? In a studio, painting for like hours on end, creating an exhibition in a gallery.
So romantic,
right? It is romantic, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's nice, right? But that's not really what I do, right? But when you say visual artist, it in one way obviously is still broad enough to describe what I do. And at the same time, it introduces another word that people might not be too familiar with.
Definitely.
Right? And that opens up conversations. Right?
What is a visual artist?
Exactly. Right? So if I introduce myself, so hi, I'm Tobyato, right? I'm a visual artist. Instead of saying like, hi, I'm Tobyato, I'm an artist, right? If I say artist, right, then it was like, oh, he just paints in his studio and he just exhibits at National Gallery. Right? But if I say visual artist, or sometimes I even say urban artist, right? And that opens up more conversation. And I think, again, back to the very well-crafted PR blurb that I said at the start, right? A lot of what I do is to prove that art as a career is possible, right? Because I think a lot of people that have thought about art as a career in Singapore, and they think about all those Nanyang painters that have sold artworks, have artworks in galleries, like those very nice traditional paintings, which is great. But the idea of an artist is starting to change and has changed, but people have just not caught up to it. So people like you guys, they are children, right? People like me and all the other people that are coming later, right? All of us play a part in changing that definition, right? And every project that we do kind of helps, right? And the labels, as much as we hate them, right, help as well, right? What we use to call ourselves is tagged to the art that we do, and the art that we do is seen by people, right? So by and large, people see our labels. So I think that's quite a nice like cycle to think about. I don't think, I hope that in our lifetime we can do something about it, but hopefully decades later someone else would have this podcast and be talking about Tell Your Children, or maybe Tobyato, and speaking of us like how I'm speaking of the Nanyang painters, and we have created a new perception of what an artist should be in Singapore, right? And then it's up to them to change it for their version of an artist in Singapore.
However that looks like in the future,
right? And that is quite exciting. But if we can do that, then that's great. But that next generation might be the people that will do that for us, right? We might not be able to do that in our time.
It depends on how long you have to live.
Exactly. And how much of an impact and how much people will receive. Right? There's only so much we can control. So maybe by the time we retire, an artist will still be seen as a Nanyang painter. And that's fine, right? It just means that we either didn't work hard enough or the society is not ready to change. And that takes time, right? So then we guide the next generation to try. And then again, the fact that it needs to fight is also something worth mentioning, right? Every fight is only worth more because of the fight.
The struggle.
So, exactly, right? So the bad makes the good great, right? So that's one of the quotes I live by.
The bad makes the good great. So that's something a masochist would say, but sure.
Yeah, but if you think about it, right? If you're hungry, would you enjoy a bak chor mee if you're hungry, or when you're full? When you're hungry, you feel...
With that framework, I would say definitely when you're peckish or hungry,
Yeah, right? Exactly. So the bad, your hunger is bad, right? You feel weak, you feel hungry. And then it makes the bak chor mee. The bak chor mee doesn't change, it's a constant. But you enjoy it even more because of the hunger. Right? So the bad makes the good great. But without the bad, if you are like at a completely neutral state, you might not want it. Exactly. Right? And the good will remain there. And the bak chor mee is still good. Still well and good, still fancy with all its sauces and MSG and shit, but it's not great, right? So it's not like, oh, I gotta suffer, right? Because I think every time I say that, people think that, oh, you like to suffer, but that's not the case, lah. Life is filled with ups and downs, but it helps me get through the down, right? Because the downs make me think that I'll enjoy the goods more, right? If the life is just a flat line, you're not gonna enjoy anything.
Yes, exactly.
Like nothing. Right? It just be, oh fuck, it's just another day again. Right? And that's not life I want to live, right? I want to feel the disappointments that let me feel the happier points.
Where or how did you come to learn this particular piece of philosophy that has stuck with you? Do you remember?
I think again, with a lot of things in my life, it was a gradual thing. There was a few instances, right? And it's a lot of me trying to cope with things that didn't work out.
Sure.
Right? So it was a lot of like a project that I really was super excited for. Like, oh, I pumped in so much effort. Like I did more than the pitch required. The client said, oh, let's go ahead to draft 1. And I did like draft 2 and almost FA. Right? And then it was canned. Right? I'm sure you guys I'm sure most creatives have that kind of projects, right? And that feels bad. It feels horrible as a young creative that's excited to get his career going. It feels like shit. Right? But when a project actually works out, right, that it feels that much better, right? Then if that project did go through and another good project comes up, another good project comes up, another good project comes up. By the time it goes through, then a good project will just become normal. Then you lose the excitement, you lose the enjoyment of the project, right? So I think it is definitely a coping mechanism, 100% for me. But it has a coping mechanism that has helped when things don't work out, even in my life, right? Art aside,
like
Toby wise, right? It's helped me go through some tough times lah. Like why is this happening to me, right? I'm sure we've asked that to ourselves in many scenarios, right? And then sometimes you have really literally no control lah, because of things that happen to you but not to someone else for like pure chance, like no reason whatsoever. And the only way that I can get through or look past it is to believe that I would enjoy the good things more when the bad things are over lah. Yeah.
Would you describe yourself as a positive individual?
Oh, not at all.
Not at all?
Not at all.
Okay.
I'm a practical, almost bordering on pessimistic individual.
How would you describe that?
A glass holds water. That's the practical side of things.
Yeah.
And I would say less than half full.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, using the analogy lah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm definitely more pessimistic than optimistic. 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Certainly a Singapore citizen then.
Oh, for real lah.
Okay.
As in, whether or not that is tagged to me living in Singapore, it probably is.
Yeah.
But I am lah.
Yeah.
I am slightly more pessimistic than optimistic lah.
Wonderful. So I want to put some focus on what you said about showing people that you can actually make art as a career, because I think that short of a point has came up several times during this conversation. I'm curious to know, why is that important to you? Because it is a very noble cause,
right?
Like to have that in mind and to show people that it is actually possible. Why is it important to you? Is it something you've felt living here that, oh, it's not possible? Something you've heard people say before?
I think it's a very romantic thing to fight against, right?
The
but
establishment.
That's not the reason why I did it, right? I think, of course, the stigma that virtually every news media says, right? Oh, career wise, art is going to be tough, right? Is art is, I think. Okay, so I think when in the past there was a stigma that art is not possible as a career, and then that has shifted to proving that stigma wrong, right? And a lot of the conversation now is surrounding that. I think at least for me, it's not as noble as it sounds, as much as it does sound noble. I think at the core of it, it's my way of telling myself 2 decades ago that it's possible lah. Because no one told me back then. And the more I think about it, the more I think about all the people now that are at that age.
Yeah.
Right? No one's telling them that we, like me and you and all the other creatives around, are actually literally making a career out of doing art.
But they might not have known, they don't know who to look,
exactly.
They don't know who to talk to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I go to school sometimes, right? I went to Nanyang Girls' High, I went to Victoria's School to literally just talk about my work. Right? It takes time, right? But I just, me being there just shows that it's possible lah.
Because you never know who might be in the crowd listening.
Exactly.
Who might actually, maybe I might want to try.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they might not even have a conception of what being an illustrator, being an artist is.
So again, it's not a noble cause. I'm not there to inspire and influence the next generation. If it happens, great. But I'm just there as an example, as a case study, like
Tobyato, the case study,
right? Have, you know, it's literally just the word have.
Yeah.
Is there artists in Singapore? Have.
What was the reception like when you went to these schools and you shared about your experiences and stuff?
I think so. When I go to these schools, I obviously show the cooler side of things.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. Now, of course, I do try to keep things practical, but the perception has been overall, I would say, from a pessimistic standpoint, I think pretty positive.
Nice disclaimer there.
Right? So I always go to things expecting the worst, making do with what I get.
Sure. Right?
But so far, it's been pretty good lah.
That's wonderful.
I think the teachers have been quite receptive as well.
Yep.
When students are receptive is one thing. When the teachers are receptive to the fact that the students are receptive is another. Right. So far it's been some of those, which is nice lah. The fact that not just the students seem receptive, but the teachers see the students receptive. And even up to now on Instagram, I reply like all of my messages and everything. There are students that still message me.
That's cool.
From Victoria, from Nanyang Girls' High, and they follow along, right? And that fact that they follow along means at that age where I didn't see an artist as that had a career, now they do.
Yep.
and they not just meet me in person, but they are following the journey of this artist.
Yep.
Right?
It's quite monumental, right?
It sounds very noble, but again, it boils down to just being there. Right? I'm not the most amazing person, right? I'm not the most charismatic. I'm not the coolest person, but I am an artist that is making a career doing art.
Yeah. At the end of the day.
Yeah, I am, right? I'm not doing amazing art. I'm not doing like life-changing, nation recognition worthy art.
Not yet.
Maybe one day.
Yeah.
But I'm just making art, right? That is a fact.
Yeah.
It's not me bragging about my work. It's not me bragging about my credentials and the brands that I've worked with. It's just me literally saying, it's almost as saying that I'm an engineer.
Yeah.
Right? But the fact that when you say I'm an artist, those two statements are way different, and the way they are perceived in Singapore is so different. But it shouldn't be. Right? Like, I work in finance. Right? People just like, cool, you must earn quite a good amount of money in the CBD.
There's
blah,
like
blah,
a lot of preconceived notions with these terms.
Exactly. I'm a doctor, or I'm a lawyer, right? I'm an engineer, right? I work in this, I work there, I work in the bank. But the moment you say I'm an artist, people go like, straight away, right? Then they perceive what they want to perceive.
Yep.
But I hope for one day when you say I'm an artist, and like, cool, right? Oh yeah, where do you have your own space and stuff like that? But then that conversation never happens.
Interesting.
Right? Because again, I'm an engineer.
Yep.
Like Shell, ExxonMobil, right? Yeah, people just like continue the conversation. I'm an artist, like,
Do you think stereotypes? Why do you think that is? Yeah.
I stereotype 100% lah.
Okay.
I think stigmas and how Singapore lah. I think Singapore, again, okay, so I'm a bit, I wouldn't say split, but I'm practical enough to see like both sides, right? So one main reason why I think that art has taken a backseat is because of how fast Singapore has to progress. Right? So to progress a nation, innovation, science, technology, right? Pragmatic side, the functional side of things has to take the first seat. Fair.
That was the previous generations.
Yeah. And then look where Singapore has gone. Yep. Right? As much as they're still obviously not a perfect country, Singapore is Singapore lah. Right? And I'm grateful to be here.
Yep.
Right? Again, it's not a perfect country.
Yep.
But I love Singapore quite a lot lah.
I think it's important to recognize that we're building off the backs of people who have prioritized things that we don't give a second thought about, because it's a very different time, I think, from the 60s, 70s, 80s.
For sure.
Turbulent as fuck.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, we have the privilege to build off the backs now.
Exactly.
Of that. Yeah.
Exactly.
And we can think about things that they might not even have conceived before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? So the function of things was at the front seat. And that's what got Singapore to where we are. But now that we're here, so I think a large reason of why art is treated away is because of that lah. Right? So the base of the country wasn't formed.
Okay.
All right. Okay, I don't know the right terms to use, right? But like, to enjoy certain things like art and for art to flourish more, right? I think a country has to be stable enough.
Yeah, because you have the survival phase, then you have the foundational
pyramid
phase.
thing. I'm not sure what that was called, but I think that forms a very good elaboration of what I'm trying to say, right? So that, I think, is the main reason why art is viewed as such in Singapore. Like, it takes a backseat. But so that is one side of things, right? But at the same side of things, I also think that the fact that that is the case, again, gives us something to fight for. Again, that sounds a bit more masochistic, but it's like a wordy fight lah, right? If, let's say, art was already the norm, a general career, I don't think I'll be nearly as driven as I am now.
Interesting. Okay. It's very interesting.
So again, this is just me saying lah.
Of course.
Right? But then again, if that situation presents itself, I might be even more driven than I am now. I don't know. I wouldn't know, right? But I do think the fact that there is a fight, helps.
It spurs you on even more.
In some ways lah, right?
Yeah.
Like everything I just described, right? Like the fact that is there artists in Singapore have, right? The fact that I am going to schools and stuff like that. Like that is only spurred on because of the way art is in Singapore lah. And my content and my sharing is very much catered to because of that fight.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think art, just as a term, is so vague, yet paradoxically so loaded. Every time when someone uses the word art or artist or whatever. It can mean whatever someone wants to mean. And oftentimes the context doesn't really do the word justice. So I am curious to know, what do you think the purpose of art is right now? Because I can imagine back then when we were just talking about Singapore primarily, it had to focus on survival initially.
Right.
There is no time to think of such lofty ideas on what art is. Art is whatever they can see, whether they cognitively recognize it as art, because it is ultimately the definition of the individual that defines it as art. So they had a phase on focusing on survival, sure, after the separation and all that shit. And then next is building the foundation.
Yep.
Right now, as I said, we are building off the backs of whatever that has happened. So there is a certain privilege there. I'm curious to know, what do you think the purpose of art is right now? Because there used to be, art is always, let's say we were just talking about highbrow art, it's always been gated off. Oh, you have to go to a museum, you have to pay, you have to have a certain privilege,
right,
that you can even access. Yeah, because I think a lot of the good works, like let's say if you can't travel, let's say in the 90s, you can go to shows, but shows are also very limited. They are curated shows that presented to you. Let's say going to a museum, that might be difficult. Let's say if you don't have the means, you can't pay the entrance fee. There's very little public art. There's this notion of public art. So I'm curious to know, right now, art is more accessible than it is before.
For sure.
Yeah, museums are open, they're free. There is public art. You can go on Instagram, you can get a saturation of pieces, or however you choose to define it. Yeah. What do you think the purpose of art is right now in 2022?
I think it's quite a layered question, right? And I think layered questions deserve layered answers, right? So I think I'll answer that in like, I'll attempt at answering that in a few phases, right? So I think at the core of it, art is okay. So there's a function portion of art, right? You cannot argue that it's not. Like Netflix shows, UI UX. Yep. Right? It is still creative work. UI UX, functionality design is still art. Right? So that is a very clear practical purpose of art. Yep. Right? Everything you touch daily is created by a designer. And that is art in its way, right? So that purpose there is easily answered. Yep. The functionality of it. Okay. For sure. Right? During like circuit breaker, that was very, very, very visible, right? Netflix, all the games online and everything. And yeah, so the functionality part of it serves the purpose, plain and simple. And I think then moving outside, so outside of the functionality of art, I think one happening that I would like to bring up in Singapore, right, is like night festival.
What is that?
Or like iLight. Yeah. Right? Like festivals whereby people just show up and see cool shit. Right? Like that in essence is the purpose of art in a way.
To be seen?
To view and to enjoy certain things. I wouldn't even say enjoy. To view and experience shit. Whether or not you like, Singaporeans are very straightforward. Okay. So I did like an installation for iLight at Fort Canning. I did like some fat birds. Yeah. Right? I did like a series of fat birds along a pathway. Yeah. So one night I just went there. So I took a chair, I sat down just to like see people's response, right? And most people enjoyed it, right? They just like poke the fat birds, which is great. Yeah, it's accessible, right? You're enjoying it, yeah, good. But then there were a lot of straightforward comments Things like, oh, bird only, oh, it's just birds. So fat for what? Why am I fat, right? But I wasn't mad because they took the effort to go out to experience those birds. So I guess the broader question, right, about the purpose of art, right, it boils down to what do you want to do with life, right? So what's the purpose of going to the movies? To enjoy it, right? To feel something. And I think art serves directly that purpose, right? A good or bad reaction is a reaction. Yep. So if you like the fat birds, you take a picture of it, you poke it, and you enjoy it. You don't like the fat birds, you move on to another exhibition. You go home. You go home and you tell your friends, hey, fuck,
I see a fat bird.
I see a fat bird. Like, don't go, don't bother, waste time, man. But that is still a reaction. And that, I think, is the purpose of art. For people to feel and react, whatever that reaction may be. A good reaction, great. A bad reaction, also good. Right? That makes you feel alive. Right? Imagine if you Imagine going to Night Fest and feeling nothing, having no opinions on anything at all. That's so sad, right? And I think art is just a form of a way for people to have feelings and emotions and reactions to certain things. Be it good and bad. Reactions.
Because it's a very human response.
Exactly, right? I create artwork. If you don't like it, then you don't like it. But it's still a reaction. It still gives you emotion. It still carries a conversation. Right? And that is the purpose of art, I think.
Do you feel that people might have a misconception of what art is? Because they see or they hear a piece of music and they think the surface glossy thing, that is art. But what you're saying that is, it is oftentimes an expression or an invocation of something more human that goes beyond whatever physical medium we're looking at.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a misconception? Yeah.
I would argue to say that art is never misunderstood.
It's never misunderstood.
Because it's just based on what each audience's knowledge of the artwork is. And that is oftentimes limited.
Yep.
Right? The artist statement can not always be there. The artist can never be there.
Yep.
All the time.
Yep.
Right?
They get to experience whatever is there.
Exactly.
Yep.
Right? So their understanding of the art is what they're exposed to. Right? So you cannot say that they misunderstand and misconstrued the artwork.
Yep.
So I would argue and say that art is never, there's never a misconception with art. It's just different interpretations and different responses.
Yep.
Of course, as someone that creates art, right? Which is why I took the chair and sit down, right? I want to be there to try to explain to people as much as I can.
Do people even know that?
As in, it's also like, it was a bit of an odd situation. I sat there, right? Then sometimes when we walk by, and it's like, oh, it's very nice. Then I was just like, oh, thanks. Right?
This random guy sitting
right?
there.
And then they obviously look at me like, who this weird fuck, right?
Yeah.
And then like, it's like, oh, I designed the birds. And then like, oh, right?
Yeah.
Like, so like, and then I get to talk a little bit of my art. But again, I cannot do that for everyone.
Yep.
Right? So, but my inability to do that, or the festival's inability to put up many more signages, does that mean the artwork there's a misconception of the artwork? No. Right? It just means that the artwork is understood and conceptualized as such. So I would say that there might be a misconception with the intention of the artwork, but the artwork is never misunderstood.
Because it's what the individual want to get from it.
It's it, right? If you look at like Damon Hirst, right? I think it's a very good example, right? It's a frozen shark, like dots.
Yep.
Right? If you don't understand his work or like what he's trying to do with being conceptual artist and stuff like that, you would just see it as surface value, and then like majority of people just do it as that, right?
Yep.
They just know that it's a shark frozen in fluid.
So that's the physical manifestation of that idea.
So is that a misconception of his work? You could say that.
Yes and no.
Exactly, right? Yes and no, right? But I would never say like yes. Oh, there's a misconception. You are wrong.
Yep.
You don't understand his work and you go and read it.
Yep.
But not everybody has the time or access to read on art.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right? So there, even if there is a misconception, I think the misconception is to the intention of the artwork. The artwork itself is never misunderstood, I think.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, but that's again is a very personal opinion.
Of course. Yeah. So on a similar tangent to that, do you believe that there is a right way or wrong way to create? I would say create for art because I will link the two quite closely. Right. Yeah. So do you think there's a right way or wrong way to create? Because you having been through, I guess, higher education with regards to designing and creating in university, that you have that knowledge, and you have been through the schooling and the know-how. I'm curious to know your opinion. Is there a right way or wrong way to create?
I've never thought about that, right? Because I've just created the way I create.
Like you're so in it.
Yeah. Right. But I guess when you talk about wrong way to create, I think the only wrong way I can think of is something illegal, like you do something that hurts people.
But something legal has spawned off one of the greatest art movements recently. So it's also debatable. Yeah,
exactly. But like I guess then, so I guess it's a broader conversation, right? Then is answer no, right? Is there no wrong way to create art?
What do you think?
I think it's a contextual question.
Okay.
Right? And it's a contextual personal question,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if you do something in Singapore that is illegal, that hurts people, to me, that's wrong. And that's not something you should do, right? When people are hurt, like either physically or mentally, or like it hurts their pride. Or
well-being.
Exactly, everything. And to me, that's wrong. And I think a lot about art is the intention. And intention is very important to me. So if the intention is to hurt, then to me, that's wrong.
Yep, that's fair.
If the hurt happens from good intentions, I mean, then I will look to his reaction after his or her reaction after that. Whether or not that was a wrong thing to do, is debatable. Right. Yeah.
Sometimes someone can create something controversial to challenge whatever preconceived notion there is, but you can't control how the public will react. And then that is where there's a dichotomy with regards to the response, because the intent is to, let's say, challenge,
just open the conversation.
Just to open the. I think I remember that there's a lot of pushback with regards to I believe it was something like a festival. I think M1 Art Festival, and they had like this dance theatric event, and I think it was a very well-known and global event. So they got it in for this M1 art installation, but there was a lot of pushback from, I think, like the public sentiment of it. Oh, it's too obscene. Or I think going back to what you said, it's always the intent is pure. The intent is to challenge, because I think it is a global thing. It's the norm there, because art is an invitation to get that human reaction you mentioned, good or bad. It doesn't really matter. It's just the challenge of that. So that is what comes to mind. Yeah,
exactly. I think intention is quite important to me, right? Not just like even outside of art, right? Intention is something that personally I view quite strongly. Be it like intention of what, like friends making decisions. Yeah, so that translates to how I view intentions in art. Right. So I guess again, I think that question, is there a wrong way to do art? I don't think that question can ever be like answered like a mathematical yes or no.
Not as conclusive as one might hope.
I don't think it ever will be, right? Because I'm just thinking about it, right? Like even in the context of Singapore, if you do something hyper controversial, right, and you do something that really even hurts people, but then again, if that piece of art prevents someone else from doing it in the future, right? Then is that the wrong way to do art? Or is
ultimately contextual? Like like which parties are involved, which demographic is involved, who has the power there? There's a lot of conversation just for this small little question.
Exactly. Like it can be wrong now, but it can be not so wrong. Like 5 years later.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, that's entirely fair. Yeah.
I think it's a question. It's one of those questions that we just have to keep asking. And the fact that we keep asking keeps us in check. Right? That prevents wrong art, if any, from happening. In a way. Like, yeah.
I do think it's fascinating to hear your answer, because I think being in Singapore and growing up in Singapore, there's always this binary of the right answer and the wrong answer. I mean, schools are schools. They teach us vital skills, but unfortunately, sometimes schooling, they kind of inculcate you with this notion of there is always this one right answer, that there is not a lot of nuance. And I can imagine like a younger artist starting out, I have to get the right equipment, I have to get this, I have to get that, I have to go to school. So there's this like preconceived path, this is the right way, or this is the only way to become an artist. I'm curious to know, after having been through higher education for designing and for all that, what are your thoughts on it? Is it important? Is it vital? Is it something, let's say if there's a younger listener, just finished secondary school and maybe diploma, and considering, should I take up higher education to pursue my arts? Or because I feel like the answer is a lot more nuanced these days.
Yes.
And I'm not even talking about online schools and stuff like that. I feel that, especially in recent years with social media, with Patreon, all these other avenues, Twitch, streaming, there is the idea of being an artist has changed, definitely.
For sure.
And the idea of making an income has also changed. So I'm curious to know, like, is higher education necessary, important? Would you still encourage people to actually go for it too? Because it opened up your eyes, being in with your peers and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. So I've answered this question before, right? So you're right when you said that younger creatives come and ask me. So there have been.
Yep.
Right. So my answer has always been, it's not an answer that I really provided like 2 years ago, right? Because I didn't come to that conclusion yet. But after like 3 years of doing this full time, right, my answer would be, at where you're at, right, wherever that might be, right? Be it after secondary school, after poly, after JC, even in the middle of uni, do what gets you to where you want to be in your career. Do what you need to in the fastest way possible. If the fastest way for you to get where you want to be is higher education, then yes, it is vital for your journey. And that was the case for me.
Yep.
Right? Because without uni, I had zero experience in art. So that was the fastest way for me to get into art.
Yep.
Not even start a career.
Like immerse yourself in it.
Right? So if you've already got the skill sets, okay, again, this is just an example. If you already got the poly skill sets, you've known the softwares, you know everything, and where you want to be is freelancing and starting work, then uni might not be necessary, right? So do what you need to do to get to where you want to be, right? So that gap, fill that up with whatever you need. That could be freelancing.
Yep.
If freelancing is going to get you there, then freelance. If uni is going to get you there, then uni.
Yep.
Right? So I think, again, I'm very practical, right? It's a practical pessimist. Right? So do what you need to do to get where you want to be. The fastest way to get there, I think that's the key. The fastest way to get where you want to be from where you are now.
Yep.
It could be an overseas degree over a local degree.
Yep.
Right? It could be a local degree over overseas degree.
Yeah.
It could be a part-time degree while freelancing. Right? If you think that gets you to where you want to be faster, right? Then go for it. But then again, that is more so for like purely just work, like creative, right? But then there's the practical side of things, the more by the book.
What does that mean?
Right? So like, if you want to be an educator, you need paper qualifications.
Yep.
Right? If you like, with where you want to be is a lecturer, right? And some polys and some universities have requirements that you need a bachelor's, then get the bachelor's, right? And that might change in the future as everybody, you throw a stone at a random kid and the guy is going to get a bachelor's. To teach bachelor's, you probably need a master's.
Yep.
Right? So if that's what you want to do,
basically.
Pretty much if that's what you want to do, then get the master's and get the bloody master's, do your research paper, right? So essentially, I would, it's not a blanket statement. I think when people ask me that question, people expect like
a solution.
Uni was great. Yeah. It changed my life. You know, like it gave me everything I needed.
Oh, your PR voice is showing.
Right. but no, right? That's not the case, lah.
Gotcha.
Do what you need to do to get to where you want to be as fast as you can.
Yeah.
If that's Patreon, getting supports from online, if you already have a following, then just go for it, lah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just build on it.
Yep.
Respond to what the audience, respond to the industry will respond back, and build on it, right? If 1 year later you see it doesn't work out and you think uni is the way to go to get there even faster, then pivot.
Yeah.
Again, uni might not be the way. Another diploma might be the way to go, right? If you're in business and then you want to pivot to creative and then uni might feel too much of a stretch for you, then take another diploma, right? Then get to where you want to be as fast as you can. Yeah.
What I'm hearing from you, it's because of how unconventional, I guess, being an artist today is, you kind of have to take an unconventional approach to it. And I guess it takes a certain amount of gumption to actually want to take a jump like this, because growing up in Singapore, I'm sure you know, there's always like a very linear path, as you mentioned. Yeah. Not say it's safe or whatever, but there are always things that you can do that... there are things that people will expect of you to do, or certain decisions to make, and anything that strays from that notion is considered unconventional.
Right.
Yeah, but it sounds as though like being an artist, like you kind of have to have a certain amount of clarity, or you have to know that, okay, this is something I might want to try out, and have, I guess, the courage to do it. It sounds something very courageous for, let's say, someone who has just finished poly when all his friends are, let's say, going to uni or whatever, and he say, okay, maybe I want to try freelancing. I want to try just dipping my toes into an industry. Yeah, it sounds like that. And whether it's a success or not, I think is ultimately up to greater forces lah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think on the note, yes, right. In some ways, as I would never say that my path is not unconventional, and I would never say that it doesn't take courage to do what we do, right? Especially in Singapore. But also, I also do want to caution that a lot of times when you talk about unconventional paths, the thing that always comes up is the leap.
Yeah, sure.
Taking that chance.
Yep.
Right? And more often than not, most people do take that leap. But looking back 3 years in my journey, right, I can't find a leap. Because of how practical I am, I only made the decisions based on how practical they are.
Yeah.
So I guess, again, I think it boils back down to, like you said, greater forces, right? Be it the universe or karma, like me being a decent human being or whatever. But
are you?
I hope so.
Cool. Okay.
I mean, that's not for me to decide, right? I always believe that anyone that says they are the shit is not the shit. Other people need to say that you are the shit. Okay. Right? So yeah, I'm never gonna say that I'm amazing.
Okay.
Right? Okay, that's a bit of a digression. But so I think going back to the unconventional path, right?
Yeah.
My life up to this point has been a path of practical decisions.
Small decisions, yeah.
Small, like you said, micro decisions.
Small daily
right?
decisions.
Exactly. Yeah. But there, if you ask me to find a leap, I struggle to find that leap.
Yeah.
Because even as much as it sounds like a nice PR story that I went to work at art studio, then it pivoted my life, it did. But at the same time, it was a practical choice. Because with my A-level results, I could probably get into engineering and do it, right? But I knew I wouldn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
Right? So it was, or maybe I would even go, I can't remember exactly what standards the engineering courses were in the entry level, but I might not even have made it into a local U with my results. So my results were pretty bad. I was not a great student. So even the choice to pursue arts was a practical one.
Yep.
Because I would still get into uni. Right? And when I graduated, right, I spoke to other creatives. I spoke to senior creatives and asked, I'm already freelancing a bit now. Should I take the leap?
Yeah.
Right? And then people say, yeah, why not? And very motivational. Like, yeah, take the leap. You can always go back to full time, but it's harder to go to freelance and build a network again, which makes sense. But I didn't. Right? After I graduated, I was approached by agency to work as a designer. Yep. And I did it. I took it. Yeah. Again, I didn't take the leap. Right? I took the practical path. But that was a contract job, right? With verbal agreements to convert to a full-time role. Yep. Which was okay lah. It was a nice place. I enjoyed it. I did work for like Netflix and illustration and stuff like that, which was nice. But my contract ended when COVID started. Wonderful. Right? So again, greater forces or whatever, right? And then that ended lah. So the contract ended. I left. And again, at a point, I was at crossroads lah. Yeah. Right? I could either find another job. Yep. Or freelance. Right? And at that point, thankfully, my contract job, they knew that I was freelancing and they said, keep going. Right? So when I left that job, thankfully, another job came in. Right? A freelance job. Yep. And again, the most practical path was to do that. Yeah. Right? And that, like what I've described so far, is basically these little decisions and practical choices that I've made. And that hasn't stopped. Of course, I think that if you want to pinpoint a leap, it's the leap after I left the agency, right? To start freelancing. But of course, I could only take that leap to start freelancing because I had freelance jobs, right? Yeah. So it's not really a leap. You could have played out the other way where you had no freelance and exactly. You'll be back to an agency. Then maybe it'll be a bit more of a leap. Right? Like creating a whole new network altogether, like leaping into freelance without knowing anything. Yep. Like starting from scratch. I think that embodies the word leap a bit more. But then again, that is my story. Yeah. Right? Because I think, again, when I started talking about this, I do want to caution people about taking leaps.
Yeah.
Because that is one way to take an unconventional path with a gumption, like the tenacity to work through it. But that's not the only way to walk an unconventional path. Within the unconventional path, there are still practical decisions to make.
I think it's important to do this thing called risk assessment.
Yeah, for sure.
I think leaps are all beautiful and romantic and all, but more often than not, the probability of you failing that, I think it's a lot higher than you succeeding. I think it's very glossy to say, oh, let's say if I go to the School of Visual Arts, I think every illustrator wants to go there to learn, but it'll put you in so much debt. Then if your family can support it, wonderful, go for it, because it is a cost analysis. Okay, maybe I pay this, but let's say if I'm able to network so much over there, I meet all these different people. But I think it's important to do a risk analysis as to whatever micro decision, not just about I think the creative scene, but outside of it, what practical options do I actually have, and what's the probability of these scenarios happening? Yeah, because it sounds like you kind of for you, from what I'm hearing, it's like the job came, I was like, I'll do it lah. Yeah, why not? Yeah, and then maybe when that ended, another one came, and another one came, and you're just being guided along. Yeah. I mean, as I said, maybe we'll only know when we look back 2 years later, it's like, oh yeah, that job from after JC, okay, that was the turning point. Yeah. But these are all like post-rationalization. Yeah. You're just rationalizing, oh, but that.
Yeah. I think on that note, why I used the word caution when I was answering that question was, when people talk about unconventional paths and leaps, right? Based on like building off what you said about risk assessment, when you talk about leaps in unconventional paths, people always assume that you don't risk access, or like you risk access and you make the risky choice, and then that denotes a leap. So I think that's why I caution that you don't have to necessarily always take a risky path.
Take the riskiest or the lowest probability of succeeding.
I mean, like high risk, high reward, like whoa, follow your dreams, that kind of shit. But yeah, sure, right? It might pay off, right? There is values in the high risk, high reward. Tenacity, driven, courageous leaps. But I think you're right. Like again, this is stemming from a very practical person, right? Risk assessment is very important to me. I don't count it mathematically, but I do consider the practical choices. Yeah.
I think funnily enough, the universe is not practical. Sometimes things do happen. But I think I remember an experience where I think I was back in poly and graduating. I think a good portion of individuals just went to study and went to overseas to study. When I look at the tuition costs, I was like, I thought, how many prints do I have to sell as an artist to make back this 6-figure sum plus? It's like, that doesn't make sense. Why are people going overseas to study? Is it to experience it? Then okay, so let's say if it's to experience it, to experience living there, well and good. Wouldn't a holiday 2 months, 3 months there be a lot cheaper than this 6-figure sum I'm paying? Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, do risk analysis. Yes. Even though you're creative, it's not just drawing. You have to do risk analysis. So
100%.
Bridging off from that, I'm curious to know, do you know how you learn? Have you ever thought about that?
Oh, yes. Yeah. 100%.
How do you learn?
I learn by doing.
Okay, could you please explain that?
So I realized this in like the first year of university. I think everybody learns differently, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the reason why I wasn't a great student is that I'm not a great conventional student.
What does that mean? A conventional
means
student?
Like a sit-down study, like drill, memorize, like whack, right? It is very unnatural for me. Mm-hmm. As in this starts to fall into the category of like romanticizing an artist, right? Oh, I cannot sit down and study. I need to move around and paint and shit, right? But it's not that romantic right? I just learn better when I do things right? Like even within arts, if you ask me to follow a tutorial to do something, I do the tutorial, I follow step A, B, C, D all the way, I finish the tutorial and I forget everything. But if you give me a project to do that same shit as the tutorial would do, then I remember it.
It's interesting because it's just the framing of it.
Exactly,
right?
It's the context. You learn by doing. And I realized that in the year one of uni, right? Because I went to uni with no laptop.
Wonderful.
I didn't even know what Adobe was.
Yeah.
I had a desktop at home with like,
You brought your pencils.
I brought like all 2B because I didn't even know like there were like different Bs, okay?
Yeah.
Again, zero art background, okay?
Yep.
So I brought like a sketchbook.
Yep.
With like, nice thick paper, you know, like I was ready to be an art student.
So the teacher said, bring out your laptops and you had nothing.
I was like, oh, okay, we need that. Like then just nice, right? There was like the expo, the IT fair that I went to get a laptop. I bought a Windows.
Yeah. Oh, yikes. Okay.
Right? As in like, I mean, I wasn't well versed. I wouldn't know, right? I bought a Windows, right? And then I went to school and it's like, I didn't even know Adobe was a paid subscription.
Yep.
Right? And then my friend cracked it for me.
Yep.
Right? Now the school provides, which is great.
Yep.
Like, and that's how I worked through that, right? And then I started to learn what Photoshop was. I started to learn the tools because the assignment freaking called for it. If I didn't learn, I would just fail in like my first semester. Right? And then I started to become familiar with the software by doing. Right? So I got through, I struggled through my first semester.
Struggled.
Oh, 100% for sure. I mean, you can see how the gap that was, right? Someone that, like, there were people like you from poly that were in my class. Okay. Right? That were already aware of what they were doing. Right? No, just aware. I'm not like they might be fucking zai.
Yep.
But they were, at least at the core of it, they were aware of what things were happening. They don't like shortcuts, they were like clicking away, track padding away. Like, I was there with my mouse and like split screening with a Windows tab. Yeah. How do I, you know, like shit like that, right? And I learned by doing lah. And I realized that really very early on. And which is why I made a point to do stuff outside of school to expedite that learning. Again, this is not about whether or not uni is essential or not. It's about how do you get to where you want to be faster.
Expedite is a very interesting word to use in this situation.
Right. But it is true, right?
Yep, it is.
I wanted to be competent. I didn't want to be damn good. Right? I just didn't want to fail. Right? I didn't want to get kicked out of school even after finally entering a local U. Yep. Right? So I networked. I did like random freelance jobs for friends.
Throughout the schooling.
Yeah, throughout school. My first, second year, I started doing some freelance, some logos, right? Yep. They were shit. Yep. Don't think they were ever used.
Yep. Maybe but it's fundamental for your learning.
Yes. Through the shitty logo, I learned how to use the shape tool in Illustrator, right? Stuff like that. Yeah. Stuff that I wouldn't know how to use. Yep. I was pen tooling in Photoshop. But like, you can use Illustrator.
Gotcha.
Like, there's a shape builder tool. You can remove that shape without drawing it over again. Yeah. Stuff like that, right? I would never have known that if I didn't do those jobs. Yep. Right. But then again, that's how I learn. Right. There's a lot of people in school that I've seen, they literally pull up tutorials of like After Effects. And they do. And then they get it, right? And then they just like, they're familiar right after that without even like doing an actual thing. But I need to do a thing, right? Be it like a brief that I give myself. Yep. And I think that translates to a lot of what I do now, right? So I'm someone that jumps from project to project to project to project.
What does that mean?
So if you notice my page, I'm not sure if people notice, but I don't draw for myself.
You don't draw for yourself.
So like your page, it's like drawings and stuff that you draw for leisure. Yeah. Right? I don't draw for leisure at all. You pull up.
So it's always for a client.
It's always for Yeah. You give me a blank piece of paper now, I will literally draw a blank. Unless you give me a theme. Or unless I give myself a theme.
So it's like more paralyzing, like a blank piece of paper. Nothing. It's like freedom. Yeah. Creative freedom.
I live by another quote, right? So freedom without constraints is not freedom at all.
I think someone said that, right?
Someone said that. It's not from me. I didn't come up with it. Okay. I'm not trying to own it.
Could you repeat that?
Freedom without constraints is not freedom at all. Right? Because you wouldn't know what you can do. Yep.
Paradoxically enough, right?
Right, but it makes all the sense. Yep. Right? If a blank piece of paper and I just tell you to draw, that's too much.
The next question is draw what?
Yeah, exactly. But the what is a constraint. Yep. And then you can think about what to draw out of the box.
Yeah, then someone will say something and then you're building off that.
Right, right. And if building off that is doing the opposite of what someone is doing, it's still building off that. Right? So in a way, that is kind of what I am, which is again, going way back to our conversation about illustrators. I know I will never be like an illustrator.
Well, that's a triple, wow, that's a hat trick. Okay.
But because I would never ever pull up a sketchbook and draw in a cafe. And I don't think I ever will lah.
Okay.
In the near future.
Yep.
Right? Maybe if I get older and wiser, 10 years later, I might.
Yep.
But right now, I don't lah. And it's a bit sad because I used to doodle a lot.
Yeah, that was my next question. Like,
Yeah.
there seems to be like a disparity, at least from previously, like you mentioned, like I think when you were young. Right now, it's mostly for clients and for this sense of commerciality.
Yeah.
It sounds a bit that there's a divide now. Like you're always drawing for someone else and you're not drawing for yourself.
Yeah.
I guess you're drawing for Tobyato, but not for Toby.
Yeah. So I think it was a shift. It was an unconscious shift in mindset, right?
Yeah.
Like when I was doodling for Toby before Tobyato even existed, I was just doing it for fun.
Yeah.
Right. And fun doesn't require a brief.
Yep.
So again, this is the first time I might be articulating it, right? But it might not. That's why it might not be so concise or articulate. But I think when I started doing it as a career, it opened me up to what I really enjoyed as a creative, I think.
And what is that?
So without knowing what I could achieve without Tobyato, I was perfectly fine enjoying doodling.
Mm-hmm.
Drawing on notebooks, drawing on my foolscap pads and stuff. And that was great. And that could have continued all the way. Right? But the moment the possibility of it being a career opened up, I think I started to enjoy that a lot more. Right? The fact that something that I draw for a client or for anyone could live in the world, right? It could go on an ASICS pair of shoes that someone wears and runs with. And that, looking back at a grander scheme of things, again, this is the first time I'm probably like thinking about it, right? Is that I enjoy that more than the joy I get from drawing for myself lah.
It sounds like it's no longer private. You're no longer drawing for yourself, but maybe it's out there for people to look, to experience, to love. Yeah.
And again, this probably stems from what drives me, right? I still don't know.
Yeah.
Right? But I guess in some way, answering briefs is allowing me to also draw for myself. Because without briefs, I don't draw at all. Right? And I've come to realize I like things to start and finish.
Yep.
When I doodle, there's no end lah.
Yeah.
Right. I'll just draw, and like that in itself it's a bit meditative. It's quite a romantic feeling. You just draw,
Yep.
just like, and that's nice.
Yeah.
I do want to try to do that one of these days again, right? And I probably would still enjoy it, but I don't think I'll enjoy it more than drawing for clients and myself.
Yeah.
I'm drawing for tangible, real things.
Yep.
For life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting, because going back to what you mentioned about you learning by doing it, the process at which you are working from, like the basis illustration, it's like drafts and everything, but it's being applied onto so many different mediums that you might not have the knowledge even, but you're working on it. Is that always does that give you anxiety, or does it like spur you on? Like, let's say doing the inflatable or the birds,
right? You
might not have the knowledge as to how it will look like, doing like turnarounds and everything, but you just leapt into it. You just went straight. Was it, how was the process like for that? So
again, the word leap is used, right? So I would say, I guess this is as close as a leap as I could probably discern in my journey, right? So I had this conversation with my friend in university before, right? Because a lot of the freelance jobs I take on jobs that I'm way underqualified for, just to train myself to, not way underqualified lah.
How do you know you're underqualified?
I mean, like, if you ask me to do a logo and I haven't touched Illustrator before, right? I can draw the logo out, right? But to translate that to Illustrator and to give like the different formats, right? The white version, right? The PN, even exporting the formats, right? And stuff like that is something that I need to learn, right? So in terms of qualifications at that point, it was I was inadequate lah. Fair enough, but I could draw the logo, right? So the base skill set is there. Yeah, I could give my friend that and like, okay, can you export all the stuff? I could lah, I could, right? Yeah. And the project would still get done. Yeah, right. But like my friend was asking me like, hey Toby, why are you so daring? Why would you do
interesting word to use,
right? Why would you do that project when you know that you do not have the capabilities to do it right now? Yeah. Right? Why, like, that is a small example, but I took on like bigger projects that I can't remember exactly lah, but like bigger illustrations within like during submission period, that kind of shit, right? And those, it's just basically projects that he wouldn't do.
Yeah.
Because he's more of a risk adverse person. So I think this boils down to character.
Yep.
Right. So I still am in some ways, more so in the past, right? When I had less to lose.
Interesting.
Right. So I was definitely a do, fail, but fail knowing that I failed. Then don't do and regret forever not doing. And not knowing whether what could have happened.
I was going to ask, what is your relationship like with failure?
Right. So as cliche as it sounds, right? Oh, failure is a part of success and blah, blah, blah. But as cliche things are true lah, right?
For a reason.
Yeah, exactly. The fact that it's said is because it's true lah. Right? If it's not true, then it doesn't get to be a cliche lah.
Yeah.
Right. So in a way, thankfully I haven't failed a lot, right? But
It's not catastrophic.
Yeah, yet, right? But I think it also depends on the context of where you are in life. When you're just starting out, you have literally nothing to lose.
Yep.
No
Face low. Yeah.
No reputation.
Yeah.
I fuck up a logo.
Yeah.
Just this random undergrad.
Yep.
That like I already thought he doesn't know what he's doing. Yeah, he doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think I gave off that impression, but it could have very well been that. And that was like the worst case scenario. I fuck up a logo, they say, undergrad doesn't know what
Has that happened?
No, not to my knowledge.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
But you have fucked up before.
Oh, for sure lah. But
Okay.
that brings me to my second point. But I think understanding how you are and how okay you are with the worst case scenario gets people through a lot of things. Right? Like if my friend was in my scenario and he considers the worst case scenario, like doing a project and not doing well, and the client thinking like, oh, this guy cannot make it.
Yep.
He's not okay with that. And he wouldn't do it lah.
Yep.
But I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah. You're comfortable.
I'm
with
okay with apologizing and say that, okay, at this point, I'm sorry I couldn't deliver. Let me recommend someone else.
Yep.
And stuff like that. Right? There are ways to manage it lah. But my friend doesn't even want to manage it.
Yep.
And there are people like that, and that's fine.
Yep. Right?
But I think that brings me again to my second point about responsibility.
Interesting.
Responsibility drives me a lot more than a lot of things.
Responsibility. What does it mean?
So, like, again, to the point of, let's say, okay, I would post two extreme scenarios, right? So one is a simple logo job when I had no knowledge of Illustrator.
Okay.
Right? If I take on that job, right, I would see it through. Regardless of my ability. If I couldn't deliver, right, as in this is hypothetical, right? Because thankfully I didn't take on two big jobs that I couldn't complete, right? But in the hypothetical scenario that I couldn't complete it, my next, like my reaction to me failing that is not the end. I will be responsible enough to be driven enough to say, let me recommend someone else. Let me pass on all the files and see that project through and make sure you still get your shit. And that only is driven by responsibility. Yep. Right? I could very well say that I'm sorry. Yeah. I give you back your money at most.
Go find someone else.
Please go find someone else. But that was not and that's fine. And there are people that would instinctively go to that. Yep. And there's nothing wrong with that lah, right? But at the core of my being, I didn't do that. Right? And I wouldn't do that. So the next extreme example would be the inflatables. I've done 2D stuff. Yep. Right? I have dabbled in a bit of drawn animation in uni, but I haven't done things like turnarounds, right? And stuff like that. And that is essential for 3D. But this project was pitched and I wanted to do inflatables. And the client wanted to do inflatables. Yeah. And we said, okay. So the moment okay is said, right, I'm responsible enough to see it through lah. So I forced myself to learn how to do turnarounds. Yeah. Right? I did the bare minimum lah, for sure lah. I did the front, side and 3/4. Right? And then like
that is the bare minimum.
That is the bare minimum, right? And the back back, right? It is truly the bare minimum, right? I didn't even learn like go and render, right? Anything. I gave the flat turnarounds, Illustrator files. And they definitely had to feel a lot of things in between, for sure. Right? And I was there, I was by my phone lah. I told them that I know that these are just flat turnarounds. When the renders come, I will give as detailed feedback as I can. Just let me know what I can do to help. Yeah. And that is the responsibility talking lah. And then when the things came back, they asked for like colors and stuff. Then I did my best lah, right? I provided Pantones, I color matched. Yep. And even learning how to color match and learning about Pantones and shit was only learned by responsibility.
Yeah.
Right? So
Can imagine the stress, lah.
Yeah, exactly. So like it's how responsible you are, right? Again, it's not like responsibility is not like responsible or irresponsible. It's not black and white. It's just levels.
Yeah.
Right? So if someone decides to drop a project because that he cannot do it, he or she couldn't do it, it can still be seen as a responsible thing to do, to drop it. Right? Because you cannot.
It's like acknowledgement that I'm inadequate. Exactly. Let me find someone who can do it better. You get a better product at the end of the day. Yeah.
It's in again, whether or not that person decides to find someone for you, or just acknowledges that I'm not good enough, let it go. Is still a level of responsibility. But my responsibility pushes me to see it through. And that I think drives a lot of what I'm doing. Right? My responsibility essentially pushed me through burnout.
Yeah, interesting.
And is a very, okay, this is again a bit masochistic, right? But responsibility is the thing that got me through burnout, right? Because I don't give up. And even if I'm like jaded, I hate this work that I'm doing, I don't enjoy work anymore, I was responsible enough to see it through.
And that has occurred before?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
I mean, 3 years of doing projects full-time on my own, project managing, finance, everything. You know how it is, right? It gets tiring. And responsibility got me through like pockets where I was hating the work. And when you hate the work, I would argue that is a form of burnout, right? And responsibility pushed me through.
Okay.
And if I wasn't responsible, if like the core of my character is someone that is responsible to let go, it could have very well happened, but it didn't. Right? I'm only saying this in hindsight because I had no idea,
of course,
why I carried on, even though I dragged myself out of bed every day. It was because I was responsible enough to see it through. I kept telling myself, okay, never mind, just fucking finish it. Finish it, and then you figure shit out. And I figured it out, and I kept going.
I think it's important to hear you say that because it's not all sunshine and roses. Post uni,
no.
You get the freelance jobs and you have momentum in your career. You feel like you're going somewhere. It's not all sunshine and roses. It's it can be a bit grindy sometimes because ultimately you're freelancing. And would it be safe to assume that this idea of responsibility has really helped you through your freelance work? Because it sounds as though because freelancing is it's to me it's a very different beast unto itself. It is such a weird you need such a weird set of skills to freelance that sometimes one individual might not be able to accompany all because it's so selective, and not everybody has the width or the breadth of, I think, character and personality to really push it through. You can subsist on freelance for sure, but to actually be good at it and to excel and to do the jobs that you want, I think that's entirely different. So my question to you is, and maybe you've already answered this, what has freelancing taught you about yourself?
I think freelancing, again, it has taught me that I'm quite like, it taught me about what kind of responsible person I am. Right? I'm not going to say that I'm a very responsible person, right? Because there are instances in my life outside of art or during art that might not be the most responsible, right? But I understand what kind of responsible I am. And I think freelancing has made me realize, again, because I don't have much else outside of art, which is is a sad, again, art or nothing, right? I don't really do a lot of hobbies outside of art. So a lot of my life is tagged to what I do. Right? And I've come to realize that I do enjoy meeting people. I do enjoy like talking and stuff like that. And I can be quite articulate in different scenarios. I don't know if that translates now.
Oh, it does.
Right. Okay. I'm
I think the beer helps,
that.
But sure, it does.
Oh, probably. Right. But I do think that it has also brought out flaws.
Interesting.
I think that I didn't know how I wouldn't say bad, but how easily I prioritize things one over another in a not so good way sometimes. Right? When projects come in. So I obviously prefer to draw than to invoice.
So that's one part of the freelance process that you enjoy a lot more.
Of course, right? Drawing essentially is what I do, right? So I prioritize a new project over closing an old project.
Yep.
And again, this is just an extreme example, but there were instances where unconsciously, right, I prioritized starting an exciting new projects than even invoicing for completed work.
Yeah, because that is the tail end of a project.
Exactly. But it is still things that need to be done. But I prioritize that lower. Right. And that creates problems, right? And I don't get paid.
Yep. Exactly.
Right. Of course, I still do invoice, right?
But it gets delayed,
which doesn't help anyone, right? The finance team needs to pay.
Yeah, and they're chasing you.
Yeah,
then you're starting this new project. Yeah,
exactly. So it has taught me the not so good points about myself.
Yep.
Right, about how I prioritize certain things.
Interesting.
And even how I prioritize like family and friends. Like you can ask Reynard, right?
I would. Yep.
I barely meet them, and they know it's because of work. Right? Like I just flew off to Indonesia recently. The night before I flew off, I was supposed to meet them, but the client wanted something changed.
And you had to do it.
Yeah.
And then you had to fly.
Yeah.
And you came back. Yeah,
I just told them, again, they are used to it already.
Yep.
I've done this to them many times.
Yep.
As much as it pains me to say it, but it's something I'm working on, right? Freelancing and art has taught me how I prioritize my things, and it's not the best at times, So freelance has taught me a lot.
So I have a question to that. Do you feel like you could take a break?
I think I've spoken about this to a few people, right? I think because people can see the pace that I'm going. And a lot of say that, not sustainable, or you gonna rest now, or like why you work so hard for
Interesting
what?
comments. Okay.
Right. As in like it's easy to say right? And again, like I don't think they fully understand the extent of my work. Maybe they over exaggerate because they only see work.
Yeah.
Right. They don't see me going out.
Like the downtimes.
Right. Yeah, they don't see the downtimes. And I might have.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot. But there are, right? And they just think that, Toby work. Whoa. Which is true, yeah. I do work quite hard, but I think it is their perception of it.
Yep.
Right? And I think break means different things for different people.
What does it mean to you?
To me, I think it's a break from certain things that I don't enjoy as much.
Okay.
But I wouldn't do a hard break from work.
Interesting. Okay.
Because I think I would rot. Like, I still don't want to be doing stuff. But I want a break from maybe a portion of things to sort stuff out.
Yep.
So I think I do need a break in that sense, but not like a sabbatical, like a hard line, like 2 months, travel the world, wanderlust, live, laugh, love.
Yep.
Right? Yeah, if that's what a break means to you, then yeah, go for it. Spend some money, enjoy life.
Yep.
Life is meant to be enjoyed anyway. A break could also mean for me a break in my momentum. Right? A slowing down. A slowing down is a break. It's literally applying brakes.
Yeah.
Right? So that is a form. And I think I would enjoy, and I need that kind of break first before a hard stop. And maybe after this slowing down, a hard stop is required, then okay lah. Right? But as of now, I think a hard break and doing nothing would just, because again, it goes back down to art or nothing. If art is gone, I'll just be on my bed just like, and I thought about it, I will have nothing to do.
I feel like you don't have the character for that to not do anything.
Exactly. Yep. And I probably wouldn't enjoy it at all, right? And if the break is to enjoy life again, then to what extent of the break do you exact on yourself, right?
I think only you can answer that.
Exactly.
Yeah, only you have the agency to actually do that.
Exactly. And that requires a lot of self-awareness. Because when people get tired, they just rest. But even the kind of rest it matters lah.
Yeah, selective. It's nuanced to the individual as well.
But it requires a lot of self-awareness, right? If you asked me 2 years ago, I was like, I need a heartbreak. I need to stop, right? But now I see that it's not the case lah. I I probably do need a break from certain things. But a heartbreak probably wouldn't
Time to learn outsourcing.
probably, yeah. 70% of my time is not doing art anymore.
Yeah, time to learn that.
Yeah, it's something I'm working on. So I'm taking a break to figure that shit out. Right? To clean up my room. It's a mess with paints and brushes everywhere.
Outsourcing.
Yeah. I mean, okay, cleaning my room, I'll do myself.
Good to hear that.
Responsible enough to do.
Good to hear that. Good to hear that.
But other stuff, like things that I can afford not to do.
Yep.
Things that I really literally don't enjoy. Yeah. Maybe taking a break from a portion of Tobyato, focus more on Toby is also a break.
Who knows what the future would hold, or who knows how you would change.
Exactly.
So I'm curious to know, do you think you'll ever stop drawing?
Yeah, I might. I'm practical enough to say that, because again, if you ask me like 5 years ago, I'll say that, oh yeah, I want to draw in cafes, right? I want to do MRT drawings. I want to give strangers a beautiful line drawing of their face.
Yep.
And then I'll say that, oh, I'll draw all the way till I die. Like I had the same prof that taught me about the photorealism thing. He said that he has to draw every single day. If not, it doesn't feel right. Right. And like I was like, wow. At that point I was like, yo, I want that's cool. Like I want to say it and mean it. You know, like it's easy to say like, oh, I
could be a blessing and a curse actually.
Could.
Yeah.
Like, but at that point it sounds romantic. Like this guy, he loves it so much that it's like almost like a drug.
Yep.
He needs to draw. He needs to at least scratch the paper before he can have a sound sleep.
Yep.
Right. And to me, that showed the dedication to the craft and how good you are, right? To love something so much, you gotta be bloody good at it.
Yeah.
But then that has changed so much. Right? If you ask me now, yeah, I might stop drawing. In the near future, probably not. Right? Because I still do enjoy it.
Yeah.
It still forms a big part of my work. But maybe 5-10 years later,
who knows?
Yeah, I would look back at this conversation with Kevin. Yeah, Kevin called it. I'm no longer drawing anymore. I'll drop you a message, Kevin. I'll buy you an Asahi that does not explode. I'm no longer drawing anymore.
Just for your info, I can't predict the future.
Of course,
it's about
of
probability.
Course. Oh, you can't? What? What? All this time I thought you were predicting my
even though predictions could be quite accurate sometimes, but
yeah, of course. Yeah, so yeah, I'm practical enough to understand that I can answer you now, but the answer now might change lah.
Yeah, because ultimately it is about satisfying what you feel invigorated by at the moment. Yeah, whether it involves drawing or not, whether you figure out why you like drawing, and it gives you a tangent off to explore something else. Who knows? Yeah.
So I guess I think the question that I can answer with a bit more certainty, not with absolute certainty, is that I will always be creative. And I think that's I do want to hold on to that lah, right? Regardless of the medium. Yeah.
I want to hold on to that tangent, but so as we wind down the conversation, I want to explore what this meaning of being creative is. So the first part of my question is, do you believe in talent? Because the idea of talent is oftentimes very lumped together with, oh, you're creative, you're an artist. The word talent is always, it always comes together in a sentence. You're an artist, you're so talented. Do you believe in talent? After having been through the journey you have been on, do you believe in it? And if not, why? If yes, why? Yeah.
I think is one of those things. Like for me lah, right? I think talent is one of those things that is a fact.
It's a fact.
Yeah.
Okay.
People are more talented than others lah. Because there are like in primary school, right? So my earliest recollection of drawing with response from people is in primary school. One of those classes where the teacher is sick, a relief teacher comes in, there's nothing to do, he hands out papers and says, oh, draw your favorite cartoon. And I did I draw like a Pikachu. And that was, this is one of my strongest memories in my mind, right? I had no idea, I couldn't understand why my Pikachu looked more like Pikachu than my friend's Pikachu. I was like, what's that? Like so I'm willing to say that talent exists. Again, a caveat, a disclaimer, I'm not the most talented drawer.
You're not the most talented drawer.
I'm not.
Okay.
There are illustrators that are like born craftsmen. Right? I'm sure you know like those kind of people. They just draw and they can draw literally for their life, right? And I just could draw a bit better than average. And that in itself is, I cannot say that there's not talent lah. Because I had no training, no nurturing. I had exposure to the same pop culture of Pokemon on Kids Central with all my friends, right? They had sticker books, they had Game Boys as well, right? So did I. I had one Game Boy, and that was the same, right? So that the nurture, though differing, was the same lah, right? So it's about talent, is always about nature, nurture, right? And I think that a portion of that is born lah. Then again, that can be distilled down to more observational, executional, motor skills. And I think that's why at the core of it, people are better at some things than others lah, like running, sports, right? Some people are just...
There's an inclination, like the biology of the individual,
It's naturally just can run fucking fast lah, right? You just put few kids there that don't even know the word sport. You ask them to run to the car. One kid will be faster than others, right? And why is that the case? It's born, right? Yeah. It's talent. So I think talent does exist. But talent alone, I think, is not enough.
Talent alone is not enough.
As again, it's a cliche thing, right? Like talent only gets you this much, hard work does the others, blah, 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 blah. But I think it's a lot more nuanced than that. People always say like, oh wow, if you're talented but not hardworking, you'll lose to someone that's hardworking but not talented, that kind of shit. In a way, I guess that is true, but that's a very broad blanket way of saying shit. Yeah. It's a lot more, I think it's a lot more detailed than that, right? I think talent for me builds interest. And that interest can come without talent as well. It's just that the interest has somewhere to stem from. Yeah. And what you do with the interest is more important. I have friends that drew way better than me in primary school. I remember their faces. Their Pikachu looked more like Pikachu than mine. And they were drawing like Raichus and like Ninetales and shit. And they were nailing it. And they're not doing art at all. Right? So talent, I think talent exists. Talent breeds interest. If talent doesn't breed interest, then it stops there. Right? It goes back, I guess it goes back to more about there's only so much you can experience in this world. How many people could be excellent drawers but have never drawn?
Exactly.
How many people could be, like I could be the best
cook,
hurdler,
right?
Like, I'm just going upscale because I've never touched a curling stone man, like whatever.
But you've never had the opportunity to even try.
Right? I could be the best in the world. Yeah. I could be the most talented curling stone slider. Yeah. Could be the best man. Yeah. Right? But I've never got to experience that. Yeah. But it doesn't matter. Right? Because talent aside, I enjoy what I'm doing. I have interest in what I'm doing and I keep doing it. Talent gets interest and interest builds whatever it wants to be built into. Yeah. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
I think it does, because I'm also just very curious to know your perspective on it, because I can imagine if I'm someone young listening to this and I've never felt quote unquote talented enough. I see my peers, they can draw so well. And let's say if we've already established, I have the interest into to perhaps explore higher education in art, should I even do it? Because the idea of talent, it's funny because you kind of have to compare yourself to others to kind of get the notion of it. But then when you're comparing yourself to others, chances are usually you will downplay what you have and you will exalt whatever other people have, and you go into that whole dimension. I'm not talented enough. And as I said, it's oftentimes a very close concepts to creativity. Sure, it exists in, let's say, sports. It exists in a lot of other dimensions, but I think creativity is something, you're very talented. You have the eye for photography. You have the eye for films. It's oftentimes part and parcel. Yeah. So it's interesting to hear your thoughts about it. My next question is, what does it mean to be creative to you? Is that a framework? Is that how you view life? Is that a particular set of philosophies that you stick to? What does it mean to be creative? Because art is the manifestation of it. Right. But what does it mean to be creative?
I think I I don't have a lofty
Sure.
life framework answer.
Yep.
I think at the core of it, I'm quite a simple person. I'm not sure if it translates to my fancy articulations of my words, but I think at the core of it, what I enjoy is conversations, right? So conversations with people, conversations with briefs, and answering those questions. So conversations essentially is just question and answer, lah.
Yeah.
Like, how's your day? Oh, my day is fine. How about yours? Right? Stuff like that. So essentially it's conversations. And that to me is what being creative is about, lah. Right? Answering questions, and continuing conversations.
So exploring the interaction with people and what they think and stuff like that.
Yeah. So for me, it's like problem solving, right? Like every brief in essence lacks an answer. Yeah. And as long as people want to keep asking me questions, I will keep trying to think of creative ways to answer them, lah.
Interesting.
So that to me is what being creative means, lah.
Yeah.
Again, it's not tagged to art at all, right? It doesn't it's not tagged to visual art, right? It could be maybe in the future I become like a consultant and I'm still creatively solving problems. Yeah. That to me is still creative, lah.
Yeah.
As long as that conversation is still happening, as long as there are still problems for me to creatively answer, that to me is what being a creative is, lah.
That's a beautiful answer.
Oh,
I think
is
my
it?
last. I think it is. Yeah.
Oh, snap.
My last question to you is: what does success mean to you right now?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think right now, because of what I'm fully aware that I've done quite a lot within a short span of time, right? I cannot not acknowledge it, right? So again, this is not me bragging. This is me coming to terms with my journey, lah.
Exactly.
So I again starting on this journey, success is almost like a bar, right? Like a benchmark. Like, oh, I get a car. Okay, now I'm successful. I have a house. I have a 5-figure income. I am successful. But starting on this journey, my art or nothing journey was, I never had like an end goal. So I would never, it's a question that I would never say that I'm successful because I never had an end goal.
Yep.
Right? So I think if you break that question down, are you a successful artist? Maybe. Or are you successful in making a career of art? Then yes. But are you so there's a lot of ways you could answer that successful question. Again, back to being creative with question and answer, right? So it depends on how you define your question, right? A lot of people say that, it depends on how you define success, which is true, but I think it's more of how you define your question, and then you answer whether or not, based on your question of how you deem success, then I can answer whether or not I'm successful or how I view successful.
Okay.
Yeah.
So essentially what you're saying is the question is bad?
No, I mean, no, yes and no.
Okay.
I wouldn't call it a bad question. Yeah. It is a question, right? Again, back to the neutral point, right? The fact that I had a reaction to that question doesn't mean it's a bad question. Was my reaction bad? I hope not. But it was a reaction, right? So I think it's more of like, if that might be the right question for someone that knows the answer to. Right? If someone is like, if you ask someone, do you think you're successful? And they should say, yes, I'm successful. I've achieved this much if I wanted to do. Then okay lah, then that's the right question to ask. Right? But for me, it's not I don't have the right answer. Okay. I think that's a better way of explaining it, right? So it's not a wrong question, but I don't have the right answer.
What would it mean for you to say to yourself that you're successful? What has to happen?
I don't know, right? Because again, I don't have an end goal. Okay. If let's say like, as much as I speak about making art accessible, changing the stigma, I have thought about it, right? Even if it happens in our lifetime and they say that, people like tell your children, like Tobyato really changed the thing, stigma is now gone. Yeah.
Everybody wants to be an artist.
Right. Yeah. But then if we sit down here 25 years later and you ask me, Tobyato, are you now successful? I would still think I would struggle to answer that question. And now the question is why? And I don't know.
I think that's the question for your therapist, not for me.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, this was quite therapeutic in itself. Yeah,
but I'll invoice you later. Yeah.
Oh, yes, for sure. Please do. Don't delay. But I think it's one of those questions I'm asking myself, right? So another question I've asked myself, right, is, okay, my turn to ask you. Yep. Okay. after doing TYC for like 10 years, right? Recently, Dion posted, I think, 10 years-ish.
Unofficially, I think we're about 8.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Like way longer than
7,
I have.
8, yeah.
Right. As long as you guys have been doing this, in terms of drive, right? Where do you draw the line between greed and drive?
I think it's a very weird comparison to make. What do you mean by greed and what do you mean by drive? Because drive, let's say we equate drive with motivation.
Yeah.
Then the question would be greed and motivation. It doesn't really make sense.
Right. So
Yeah.
okay, so I guess my question stems from like our careers. Right?
Yeah.
We always want to do more, right? The next big thing, continue the
Okay,
career, right?
okay.
Like wanting to continue, right? The next collaboration, the next art project, the next mural. At which point is that a hunger to do more,
Okay.
or is it a greed to want to do more? You know, do you see where my question is coming from? Because that's something I'm trying to answer, but I do not have an answer to.
I'm not understanding the question.
Okay.
Is it because it's both
I
internal drives,
Yeah.
hunger and greed, yeah.
So I guess how do you discern one drive from another? Because it's about intention, right? Right. So one is like drive to genuinely want to further your career. Right?
Okay.
One is greed, like wanting more for yourself, right? But where do you draw that line? Because essentially both are intentions of moving forward and doing more.
I wouldn't agree with you that both are
please,
intentions.
Please break it down.
Both are intentions for you to do something.
Okay.
The idea of greed differs from hunger because I think greed is something that might not necessarily push you forward, but it also is important to define what type of contextual forward you want.
Right.
Because greed can manifest itself in different ways.
Yep.
But if you were to ask me, I would identify that these two, let's put them as emotions,
Right.
or these two drives, they are ultimately self-serving. They identify or they point out certain things or certain things that you might want to do or you might want to try. So that is what I would learn to hear, learn to listen.
Okay.
Greed isn't inherently morally good or evil. It is just a drive, ultimately at the end of the day.
Okay, fair.
I would say that I will learn to listen to it, let's say, and not be too caught up, or this is greed or this is hunger.
Right.
Ultimately, they are still, I like to believe that these emotions or these drives serve me, serve the one individual known as whatever you're looking at right now. Hence, therefore, it's important to identify it, and then let's say they say, okay, I might be very interested to make a film. Then I have to do the risk analysis. I was like, okay, why do I want to make a film? And that's where all the, I guess, the rationality and the consciousness of it, and not even talking about practicality, it's like, do I have the capabilities or do I have the intention to see it through?
Right.
And if everything's a goal, then we talk about practicality. How do we make it happen? But I think a lot of these are like internal thoughts and you are penning it out and you have to see whether it interests you or not. I think ultimately, I think for me, not talking about TOIC, I think for me personally, it's if it interests me and I can see myself doing it, I will try it.
Right.
And whether or not I don't really care if it succeeds or fails, but at least I've tried it. Right. Then we can see whether I want to add it to the repertoire.
Right.
But I think for me personally, what I realized is that a lot of ideas, there are certain ideas are very funny because I always felt that the ideas come to you. You don't go to the idea. That's what I personally believe it. Like your character and whatever I'd say frequency, but whatever you're thinking about, whatever your makeup is at that point in time, ideas will come to you. Right. The ideas are selective to you because the ideas you have and the ideas might have, they might overlap, but they're not always the same. Hence, therefore, people do different things. Right. People think differently about different things. So what I've noticed is that ideas can be quite persistent as well. And then when it is persistent, you have to stop and you have to identify why is it persistent? What traits of that particular idea? It could take the form, let's say you really want to publish a book, but you have to identify why is it persistent? Why is it coming up cyclically, like 1 year, 3 years, but you're not answering it. So you have to answer why is it so persistent? But a lot of these are like internal thoughts here, not really self-awareness, but I like to believe that drive, hunger, all these different things, they are working for you ultimately. Right. Because it's quite easy to not think of it that way. Like, it's greed is morally bad because I don't know, religion or parents. But you need to have the drive to do something. You need to have motivation. If you don't have motivation, if everything is a blank slate, and there are people like that, they they are not very affected by external or internal stimulation. Their emotional palette is blank.
Yeah.
And that runs into another problem. You have no drive to do anything. And the world, to me, abhors stagnancy.
Right.
Because the world is constantly moving.
Yeah.
Even though that you might feel, quote unquote, feel like you're stagnant,
You'll be moving behind.
it will be moving because it's 4-dimensional space.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope it answers your question.
Yeah. I think it's I guess thanks for the answer, because I've always, more recently, I've always seen them separately. Right? Like one is bad and one is good. Right? So I've honestly never thought of them both as like one and the same in terms of they're both like drives, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily categorized separately.
It depends on whether you're placing a moral judgment on it, which is we all have different moralities.
Yes.
And B, whether you're talking about greed for, let's say, specifically contextually money.
Right. Yeah.
Because greed for money, it's not necessarily bad as well.
Yeah.
We live in a society that unfortunately we need money for exchange to buy stuff. Yeah. But if you're talking about over excess greed, let's say going back to what you mentioned earlier, you're hurting someone intentionally to get this cash, then you have to identify it.
Yeah.
Is it worth it? Whether you want to do it? Because everything can be rationalized. It's a good thing. That's what I feel.
Yeah.
But ultimately it is your intent, your morals. Are you able to sleep at night?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Before we end, is there anything else you would like to talk about?
Oh, I guess. Okay, do we have a lot of time?
Not on this podcast, but we have a separate after session waiting for us.
Yeah. I mean, for those that don't know, I've been a fan of TYC for like the longest time.
Thank you.
Right? So a lot of to end off on anything, right? I guess I could end it off on this, right? So a big reason of why I get to do what I do is because you guys do what you do. In terms of, as in, it's a fact, right? And I'm sure you have to acknowledge it, right? The fact that you started a studio with friends, and that in itself is a dream for a lot of people. And the fact that you did the projects that you have done, opened up the industry for collaborations within Singapore and murals in Singapore. And then the industry was open to it. And then clients became open to it because the industry was open to it. And I think it started, it grew. And hopefully with what I do, I can do the same for the future generation. Yeah. So thank you, I guess.
That is a beautiful way to end this. Where can people find you?
Oh, Instagram.
Plug yourself.
Tobyato.
How the fuck do you spell it?
Tobyato.
Okay, so it's Tobyato on your Instagram. Yeah. Are you on any other channels? Are you on TikTok or whatever?
I have the username on TikTok, but there's nothing there, so there's no point. I just lock it in so someone doesn't steal it and sells it to me like 15K, like.
Okay.
Yeah, so as in Instagram is my most active platform.
So to keep up on whatever you're doing next, just visit your Instagram?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I reply to all DMs and everything. I might take time, but I respond to everything.
So if people have questions, they can just DM you on Instagram.
Do.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I reply everything.
It sounds like a guarantee. Okay, perfect.
Oh, I do. Yeah, it is. You can see my Instagram now. It's like 0 unread.
I will look at it later.
Yeah, sure. Okay, there might be some unread now, but...
This has been a beautiful conversation. Thank you, Toby, for your time.
Right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode and feel inspired. If you enjoyed what you heard thus far, do give us a follow on Instagram. And don't forget to share and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next episode.